Diving into a record today that I'm kind of ashamed to admit I had never listened to until I thought about what I could cover for the letter N. I wanted to do something that was historic, an album that maybe people were familiar with. And then this one came to my mind. I'm like, holy crap, I never have stopped to listen to this album. I maybe know one or two songs on this one, and I have some strong opinions about this band that I don't even know are warranted. Going into this record, I was like, I kind of think this band is a little overhyped, a little overrated. I think they're a little pretentious in some regards. And you know what? I think I was wrong on this one. I really do. But today, we're diving into this record all the way back from 1977. You're listening to Peace for Punk, and today, N is for Never Mind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols are a very influential band, a band that a lot of current punk bands, a lot of other artists accredit to. Like they give the props where the props are due. They weren't really around all that long. They were chaotic. They were kind of at the forefront of punk rock. They really were, to a degree. Now, again, I had some strong opinions about this band, and I think it was wrong. I think they're very influential, and I kind of see where they influenced a ton of bands. So they kind of were wedged between the Ramones and the Dead Kennedys. I kept getting like Dead Kennedy vibes. I kept getting Ramones vibes. The Ramones technically started first. They were, from New York. They were the ones like playing fast and have like these repetitive type of songs, a little more um, bubblegum, if you will, but it has similar DNA in there. You got the short songs, kind of simple chord progression, stripped down rocks and fast tempos, and the Ramones, of course, were really good at doing that. They did it in 1976. And then in 1977, you kind of get that with the Sex Pistols, but it's a little more mean, a little more like in your face, and a little more like politically shaken. So kind of same skeleton, but completely different personalities in this regard, which is kind of why I liked it. Like I love the Ramones, but I do agree they are a bubblegum band, but they're classic, they're vintage, everybody likes them. And they're very good. Pardon the kid that's looking through the window right now when you're watching this on video. Um, but the Sex Pistols really made a name for themselves very, very quickly, and rightfully so. They're wild, they're nuts. The tragic end to the Sid Vicious world is very sad. He died of a heroin overdose. There's a lot of controversy with that. There's a lot of stories with that. But that's just kind of what it is. And I never sat down and listened to it. Sorry. And there's really no skipping in this album. And it's really good. First impressions, I was like, all right, I like this. This is pretty awesome. Um, the Sex Pistols were banned from a lot of places. They got dropped by their label. People were offended by the name of the album. The band name, the Sex Pistols, just was, ugh. You have Johnny Rotten at the forefront, who's not afraid to get in somebody's face. He's not afraid to be confrontational. He's not afraid to be a little bit of a challenge. Um, but I think this is a pretty like intentional album. I think what they sing about and what they're talking about can be chalked up to like this is punk rock. This is how it goes. This is what they do. It was produced by Chris Thomas. He helped shape kind of this massive guitar sound. And then Steve Jones was also a producer on it. So we dive into the album. We have Holidays in the Sun. The first impression that you're going to get from this studio album from the Sex Pistols. And I think they do a really good job having this kind of stomping, militaristic type of tempo to it a little bit. It explodes lyrically, kind of like boredom mixed with some tension, trying to escape, but nowhere actually feels any better. Like it just they're just thinking about something that, like, I think a lot of situations that people go through. I don't want a holiday in the sun. You know, I want to see some history because now I got a reasonable economy. Now it's interesting sitting down and listening to an album like this because, you know, all the albums that I've talked about before are something that I had a connection with. I don't necessarily have a connection with this album, and so I'm just kind of trying to get a, a bare minimum understanding of a bare minimum vibe of it. And you know, over time, yeah, maybe some memories will grow with it, but this is kind of gets to be brass tacks. Like, this is what I heard. This is the vibe that I got. It's got the good power chords on there. Johnny Rotten's voice is very like kind of like that classic punky type of, a little bit of a whine to it, but it's a little like aggressive, if that makes sense. It's tight, and it's an aggressive song with purpose. And I was like, all right, this is probably what we're gonna get, and it kind of is what it is. It's not sloppy, it's not messy. Like, again, this is intentional. It's designed pretty awesome. Then it goes into Bodies, which first listen through, I was like, oh, I kind of like this song. This is pretty good. Like, I like it. And then I listened to it again, and I listened to the lyrics. She was a girl from Birmingham. She just had an abortion. She was a case of insanity. And I was like, okay, I could see why some people would be a little bit turned off by this, talking about some uncomfortable, chaotic situations that, of course, are controversial. I can't even imagine, you know, in 2026, that topic alone is hard for a lot of people. I can only imagine what it was like in 77. The vocals kind of have this unraveling type of tone and vibe to it a little bit, which again reminded me of Jello Biafra in a way. It's almost like Jello Biafra has like this yodel. I don't know how else to describe it. And I was kind of getting that vibe a little bit from Johnny Rotten, the way he was singing in the song Bodies. But it's a song that's pretty disturbing in a sense. It's raw, and they're not trying to be your best friend. They're not trying to be likable. They're just this is a pretty intense song. It is it really is. And you know, bands still to this day talk about stuff like this. And sometimes I think it's more to be shocking rather than like making a statement or opinion on something like that. And I think this, you know, this was intentional in some degrees. It was meant to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. But it just kind of shows you, like, they're kind of here to provoke people. They're kind of here to make people think about things in a different way. And I think they do a really good job. Number 3 is a song called No Feelings, which I really like this one a lot. This was a pretty solid song. It's, you know, kind of talking about emotional numbness a little bit, detachment, and this kind of, you have this riff that's sharp and driving people forward. And then you have this Johnny Rotten dismissive tone. I think Johnny Rotten was pretty dismissive overall. I watched a few interviews with him over the years. It's not like I wasn't familiar with who he was. I know who he was, and I always thought he was kind of a dick. And he probably was. I think he probably still is a little bit. I think, wasn't he a judge on that Ozzy Osbourne show where they were like looking for it was like it's kind of like American Idol but for bands. I think he was one of the judges, and he was like kind of like, "Oh, bloody hell," or whatever, whatever he's saying on that. But this is kind of like this vintage Sex Pistols attitude. Like we got no feelings, um, no feeling for anybody else except for myself, my beautiful selfish. All right, I guess that makes sense. Musically, it has a little more structure to it than casual listeners might expect from me. So it's like kind of like some pop songwriting, I guess, a little bit, if you will. But it is a good one. I do like this one quite a bit. I would say this one is definitely one of probably my favorite ones on the album. Number 4, Liar, is I think it's a song about being a liar. Accusations, tensions. It's Johnny Rotten talks about hypocrisy and betrayal with his little snooty voice and snooty tone with it. Pretty straightforward. You're in suspension, you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar. A liar. Lie, lie, lie. Which is hey, we know how that goes. We've all dealt with a person like that. But they're kind of like more locked in musically here than the punk stereotype of being sloppy and just loud and distorted and stuff like that. Now, like the Ramones definitely were not that. They were very polished. They were very, like you said, bubblegum and power chord stuff. Like they had good composure with all their albums and their sounds and stuff like that. And the Sex Pistols did as well. But a lot of other punk bands in the scene at that time, in the early or the later 70s, early 80s, a little sloppy, kind of have like this chaotic live performance, which the Sex Pistols definitely did. But when it came to record, I think they were pretty intentional with wanting to sound good. And this one really fits that bill of this polished kind of cool sounds, which I was into, and I liked it a lot. Problems is another one of my favorite songs on the record. Kind of has like this punk energy to it. There's problems all over the joint, a lot of issues everywhere all the time. The hook is blunt. It's got like a urgent type of tempo to it a little bit, and it's just like agitation made in a musical fashion, if you will. Again, it has this theme of frustration, social kind of isolation, dislocation. I think you kind of see that throughout the album a little bit. There's not a lot of subtlety here. They don't work in metaphors or anything like that. They're telling you how it is. Everything is broken. The system's broken. You're broken. I'm broken. We got problems. Number 6, of course, is probably one of their most famous songs out there, and a song that I was familiar with is God Save the Queen. I think a lot of people first diving into the Sex Pistols know this song at least. It's their most famous statement and probably the most kind of like just well-known song throughout their catalog, along with Anarchy in the UK, which we'll get to in a little bit. This was released during the Queen's Silver Jubilee year, and it was kind of like it was interpreted as a direct attack on the monarchy, nationalism, and everything patriotic on that side of the ocean. It is it's tight. It's an anthem song. It's got this chorus. It's got rhythm. It's got that that guitar riff that everybody loves and enjoys, while also having that mocking and frustrated type of criticism in Johnny Rotten's voice. Now, this is like cookie cutter punk rock with a lot of bands. You think of all these like politically charged bands, something like Rise Against or Strike Anywhere. You name it. There's a million of these political bands out there that are making bold statements and saying things to kind of get the attention of people, to get the attention of listeners. Again, it's not for strictly shock value. They're not saying it to just say it. They're saying it because they have a purpose. They have a feeling towards it, which I think is important. It's using that right of free speech, at least in America, to kind of say these things. You know, God save the Queen. She ain't no human being. This is really a Sex Pistol anthem at its finest. 17 follows that song. It kind of captures more frustration directly. It's fast. It is about being young, boxed in by society that expects you to be a failure already, which we see that today. We see that in 2026. Every generation has some criticism. The millennials are like this. Gen X is like this. It's almost like every generation is almost expected to fail worse than the generation before. And especially when you're young, people are just like, oh, what are your dreams? You want to do this? Ah, yeah. Well, make sure you have a plan B. Make sure you got this or that. So this isn't politically charged like God Save the Queen, but that rebellious kind of anger is there, and it's there across the entire album. It's it's kind of like a good momentum across the album. And then we get to the next song that is also almost as equally as popular as God Save the Queen, Anarchy in the UK, kind of this manifesto, if you will. This is a very iconic Sex Pistols song that, you know, I am an anarchist, which was a crazy thing to say, especially back in the day. And that's going to get people's attention. It's, you know, it's just all kind of there. It's kind of theatrical without like being theatrical, if that makes sense. And it's really like, this is who I am in song form. This is my identity. This is what I believe in, and this is how I'm going to do things. And I like it. I like it. I like an angry punk song just like everybody else, and talking about it's like, hey, like this world is crazy, and then things are kind of going wild, and we're gonna use a platform to create this chaos and to create this discourse a little bit. And it turns out to be one of their most successful songs. So they're doing something right here. That's for sure with Anarchy in the UK. And then we go into a little different vibe with the next song called Submission. It's a little more bass heavy. It's got a little bit of a funk, like a groove to it. It's got this less, it just doesn't feel like the rest of the album, kind of. I got a really different feel to it. You still have this sarcastic, you still have this like in your face kind of sound to it, but it's not like super aggressive, but it's like weird experimental in a punk way. And I do like this one a little bit. And I think it's good that this is present in this kind of album, because you don't want like the same thing over and over again. You want a little bit of variety. You want like some different vibes. And this one definitely kind of does it and goes into this weird dark humor, tongue-in-cheek kind of vibe to it, if you will. And we'll see that a little bit more later in the album. And it just kind of shows that they understand tension, and maybe they're not a one-trick pony. They can throw some bass heavy songs, but Submission is cool. Opening with "I'm on a submarine mission for you, baby." Isn't that romantic? Maybe not. Pretty Vacant coming in at number 10. It is a pretty good single. It talks about being bored again, being dismissive, presented with these kind of like riffs that are more polished than that stereotypical punk sound again. They have a little bit more of a melodic side in this song, and it's catchy enough and to the kind of like be a sing-along song, if you will. And just it shows they can do different things. They can have a nihilist, nihilism. They can make it sound like a sing along, which is fun, which is good. I do like this one as well. You kind of like those three songs in a row, kind of like give it like this weird, the album like a little bit of a shift, kind of. Um, but it's catchy, and it has like emptiness and attitude behind it as well. The themes are all pretty present still. Then it moves to number 11, a song called New York. And I'm going to say this feels like some old school music beef. The Ramones were from New York. They really pioneered the punk scene in the United States, and we're doing things like that. So this one seems a little targeted, even though the Sex Pistols do have like that same skeleton, that same backbone of what punk was back then. Of course, it's different, but it's a little messier, but controlled by them. It's almost got to be a direct a direct attack on the Ramones, I would say. You have like a little more like of a really like kind of like, I'm gonna be the dick that you think I am in this, almost, which is pretty interesting. The guitars are still kind of like thick there. It's talking maybe a little bit about the overall scene, the fans of it, other bands as well. So I kind of like it. I kind of like this thing. I grew up in the 90s where like the diss tracks in the rap world were always a lot of fun, and people are always seeking those out. And you get that sometimes in the music scene as well. No Effects has had a lot of beef with bands out there, and have made it a point to mention it in songs. And it kind of all starts here. It kind of all starts with the Sex Pistols. So they're pioneering the beef tracks. I like that. Good job, Johnny Rotten, even though you are just a crusty, angry fella. Closing out the album with a song called EMI. So EMI is a pretty solid closer. This was after the band had been dropped by labels. Ending the album with EMI is pretty funny, because I think EMI was the label that they were initially on. And another diss track after diss track here, mocking in it, and it kind of has like that punch to it again that we got back at the beginning of the record. It kind of brings it now full circle. It's back to these power chords, and it's kind of saying like punk was never only anti-government, it was anti like gatekeeping, anti-corporations, anti anyone trying to like just cash in, if you will, with which I think a lot of those ethos kind of are the same for a lot of different bands. I think things have definitely shifted. The punk world is not as aggressive as it once was. Like, it's still aggressive in a way, but it's not like you don't have to worry about going to a show and then getting your head kicked in by some skinhead or something like that, which is good. I'm cool with that. But of course, yeah, this is a good closer, a good way to just say like, we are the Sex Pistols, and we are pissed off about a lot of things. We're gonna talk some smack, and we don't care who says that or who worries about it. Of course, what comes along with the Sex Pistols is Sid Vicious becoming kind of becoming the poster child a little bit, and going through a crazy time. It wasn't too much later after some of these releases that Johnny Rotten had left the band, and he would return throughout the years for some Sex Pistol reunions, and he would perform a little bit, but he's not doing that anymore. He's saying that it would go against kind of like what they originally were doing. It wouldn't make any more sense um to perform with the Sex Pistols. The dude is 70 years old. His real name is John London or Lydon, something like that. And yeah, he's I'm sure he's settled down in his old age a little bit, but he he no longer associates with them. He left the band because of like management disputes, because of issues with other band members and kind of stuff like that. Sid Vicious, of course, was a pretty big legend in this regard. He played bass, but like became the face, like just doing wild and uh, crazy stuff. He looked like he was punk and he lived like he was punk. He replaced Glenn Matlock in 77. So he was not a part of, or maybe he was a part of Never Mind the Bollocks. I don't really know, to be honest. Uh, sorry, I probably should know. But again, I'm just kind of getting into this a little bit. But he replaced him in 77 and became the most famous member. He could barely play when he joined. Okay, so most of the bass on Never Mind the Bollocks was actually recorded by Steve Jones, so who was producing it. Sid did play live sometimes, but it was inconsistent. Just kind of crazy. He was violent, unpredictable, a huge drug user, and had a really bad downward spiral. You know, Nancy enters the picture. Things get dark. You got Sid and Nancy. It's just a tragic story. It was like drug fueled and just destined for disaster. He was found dead in 1978 in a New York hotel room, ironically. Or actually, Nancy was found dead in a New York hotel room. Sid was arrested and charged for murder. Case never went to trial. He died on a heroin overdose in 1979 at the age of 21. So super sad, super just kind of like bummer. A young musician who had some troubles, who had some struggles, and I think was kind of like the punching bag of the band, which isn't cool. It is a bit of a bummer. And, you know, it adds to the Sex Pistols mystique a little bit, not in a good way. But I will still say this is not the most technical album, not the most diverse, but when you look at it for what it was, when it was, it is probably one of the most influential albums out there. And it's still, the ethos of it are still very prevalent in 2026. It doesn't pander to people. It's not this like kind of like fake rage. It's real. Like you know this is how they felt. They were really angry about a lot of things and they had a lot of opinions about it. It targeted the government, it targeted the media, the monarchy, all this kind of stuff. And it's just like a refusal to bow down to be anything else. They are who they are and they're not going to change that for anybody. They're going to stick to what they think, what they know. And they got dropped by labels, they got dropped by people, and it's just really uh, a punk rock staple. It really is. It's well built. It's got some good hooks. It's aggressive and it still lands. Like listening to this album in 2026 for the first time, I was like, this is awesome. I messaged my friend Joel, who was on the C episode earlier before, and he was like fascinated that I have never listened to this record. And I was like, yeah, I never have. It's kind of like, you know, I've never seen like classic movies either, specific classic movies out there. And when I go to watch them, I end up hating them. I was kind of thinking like this might be the case, especially because I had such a bad attitude towards them already. I just thought they were kind of like a band full of douchebags, and they might have been, but they were good. And I'm thankful now that I've sat down and listened to this so many decades later and now have this new appreciation for it, which is you know, it's awesome. So, you know, maybe you prefer the Clash, Ramones, Buzzcocks, or anything like that, but this is really kind of what made punk what it is. I'm going to go on record and say that. The Ramones did it as well. The Sex Pistols might have harnessed that anger and that energy a little bit more. The album artwork, of course, pretty iconic with this. It's pretty simple. It's nothing too technical, nothing too crazy. It's got your it's all pink. Never mind the bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols. You got the green banner going across it. It's very relaxed in a sense. It's nothing too wild and crazy, but the album is wild and crazy, and it knows how to pack a punch. In modern day, the Sex Pistols are kind of still going. They're on tour. They're celebrating their legacy, but they are not doing it with Johnny Rotten. They have recruited Frank Carter. He used to be the lead vocals in the band called Gallows. He also had a band called Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes. I've seen Gallows live. They opened for Bad Religion when Frank was the singer. And the whole time I was watching, I was like, this guy thinks he's Johnny Rotten. And this was like 15 years ago that I saw him. I was like, this dude thinks he's Johnny Rotten. Like he's acting, he is British, which is fine. But he's just acting like this pissed off and angry type of dude. And I was like, it was almost like, all right, man, who are you really? Like, are you really this guy? And I was kind of like turned off by it. Gallows have some good songs. Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes had some decent songs, a little more like poppy, a little more pop punky side of things, where Gallows was like super hardcore. Now he's fronting the Sex Pistols, and I've heard they're actually really good live. So it might be a band that you want to go check out. It's not the full experience, but you got some of them there. Obviously, you don't have Sid, but you have something. Johnny Rotten is not for it. He doesn't agree in the slightest. He doesn't want to be a part of it, which is fine. It's fine. Does it get like weird at a certain age when like you're 70 years old and you have a 70-year-old guy saying he wants to be Anarchy, and you're like, is it kind of old man shouts at the sky type of vibes, or is it still like harnessing what was once there back in the 70s? I don't really know. I saw Fear one time in like 2018 or something like that. And, they're a bunch of old dudes and they sound pretty cool. They're still pretty fun. So maybe it might be worth going to see them if they're hitting up a show or hitting up a city that's local to you to go check it out. But it's kind of almost like what Styx is. They have the old band Styx. They have one original member now, or maybe they don't have any original members and they're still going under this moniker. I think that's kind of what you're going to get with the Sex Pistols. But again, I could be wrong. I was wrong this first time, and I might be wrong again. But never mind the bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols, a great album. It matters. You need to listen to it, and you need to appreciate it, because I guarantee you'll get tastes of so many other bands that you enjoy from that album. And without it, I don't know that we would have a lot of the stuff that we have today, or maybe it would just sound a little bit different, look a little different. So we got to appreciate it. It doesn't have to be your favorite record, but it's something that you need to, I think, enjoy. So there it is. This week's episode. N is for Never Mind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols. Appreciate you all checking in and listening to the show. We got an interview coming up with a person who's organizing a ska festival in Massachusetts. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be a good one. Bringing along some band members as well. So I'm looking forward to that talk, and we'll continue plowing through the alphabet. Next week's letter will be from an album that I love very, very deeply. Hopefully I'm joined by a good friend of mine, and we are going to dissect it. I'm not going to tell you what it is now, of course. I got to leave you in suspense. linktr.ee/P is for punk is the link tree. In a way you can get all the stuff, all the links to the YouTubes and all that kind of mumbo jumbo. And you can get a link to picking up some stickers or picking up some shirts as well. Follow me at P is for Punk on Instagram. That's kind of where I do most of the stuff. Shoot me a message, maybe recommend some albums you'd like me to talk about, or if you want to hop on the show with me and talk about an album from one of the letters that we have yet to cover, that would be great as well. Bye.